Welcome to Spotlight Murders, brought to you by Skoob. I'm your host, Kieran Caldwell, and today we're diving deep into one of the most shocking scandals that rocked Tinseltown in the 1920s. A story that would forever change how we view celebrity culture, media power, and the fragile nature of fame. This is the tragic tale of Roscoe "Fatty" Arbuckle and the mysterious death of Virginia Rappe. Picture this: Hollywood's golden age in full swing. Glamour, glitz, and endless parties where the stars shone brightest. But beneath the sparkle, secrets and scandals lurked in the shadows. Virginia Rappe, a rising actress with a promising future, found herself at the center of a media firestorm after a wild weekend that ended in her untimely and controversial death. The trial of Fatty Arbuckle became one of the era's most sensational headlines, exposing the dark side of fame, the power of the press, and the murky lines between truth and rumor. Today, we peel back the layers of this decades-old mystery. We'll examine the events leading up to Virginia Rappe's death, the sensational trial that followed, and the lasting impact this scandal had on Hollywood and beyond. So, settle in, because today we uncover the tragedy, the controversy, and the legacy of one of Hollywood's darkest moments. This is Virginia Rappe's death, and you're listening to Spotlight Murders with Kieran Caldwell. Picture this: it's 1921, and silent films are king. At the very top of this golden pyramid sits a jolly, 260-pound man whose infectious laugh and physical comedy have made him Hollywood's first million-dollar star. Roscoe "Fatty" Arbuckle wasn't just famous, he was beloved. Audiences across America flocked to theaters to watch this lovable, good-natured, chubby man tumble his way through comedic masterpieces. But here's the thing about pedestals: the higher you climb, the farther you have to fall. And Arbuckle's fall would be so spectacular, so devastating, that it would not only destroy his life, but fundamentally change Hollywood forever. You see, by 1921, Hollywood was already developing a reputation problem. Behind the glamorous facades that studios so meticulously crafted, a new breed of journalists, what they called jazz journalists, were beginning to sniff around, eager to expose the sordid reality behind the glittering veneer. The stage was set for a scandal of unprecedented proportions, and it all began with a Labor Day party that was supposed to be just another wild Hollywood gathering. Instead, it became the most infamous party in entertainment history. A party that would leave one woman dead and destroy the career of one of America's most beloved entertainers. September 5th, 1921. The St. Francis Hotel in San Francisco was alive with the sounds of celebration. Roscoe Arbuckle was throwing one of his legendary parties, and when Fatty threw a party, everyone knew it would be something special. The rooms were filled with an abundant array of food, drinks flowed freely despite prohibition, and music filled the air with that distinctive jazz age energy. Among the guests was Virginia Rappe, an actress known as much for her wild lifestyle and love of alcohol as for her film appearances. Rappe wasn't just any partygoer. She was a woman with her own reputation for excess, someone who lived life on the edge in an era when that edge was particularly sharp. The party was in full swing when Arbuckle decided to escort his friend May Taub, the daughter-in-law of renowned evangelist Billy Sunday, no less, into town. Such an innocent decision, such a simple plan. But as we all know, it's often the smallest moments that change everything. Before leaving for this drive, Arbuckle returned to his room to change clothes. He walked into his bathroom, probably thinking about nothing more than putting on a fresh shirt. Instead, he found Virginia Rappe collapsed unconscious on the bathroom floor. Now, put yourself in Arbuckle's shoes for a moment. Here's a woman he knows enjoys her drinks, found unconscious in his bathroom during a party where alcohol was flowing freely. What would you think? Arbuckle assumed she had simply overindulged, a reasonable assumption given the circumstances. So he did what seemed like the decent thing. He carried her to his bed, intending to let her sleep it off. But Virginia wasn't completely unconscious. As he laid her down, she managed to request a drink of water. Arbuckle, being the gentleman he was raised to be, fulfilled her request and then continued with his plan to change clothes. But when he returned to the room, everything had changed. Virginia had fallen off the bed and was now on the floor, moaning and moving in obvious distress. What happened next would haunt Arbuckle for the rest of his life. After getting Virginia back onto the bed, he left again, this time to fetch a bucket of ice. Now, this might seem like an odd response, but Arbuckle had a specific reason taught to him by none other than his friend and fellow comedian, Buster Keaton. Keaton had shared a technique with Arbuckle. Placing ice against someone's skin could reveal whether they were truly unconscious or merely pretending, as it should provoke a reaction from anyone who was faking. It was this innocent attempt to understand Virginia's condition that would later be twisted into something far more sinister. Enter Bambina Maud Delmont. And here's where our story takes a dark turn. Delmont wasn't just any party guest. She was a woman with a documented history of blackmail, prostitution, and swindling. Growing impatient while waiting for Arbuckle, she decided to check on him. When Delmont entered the room, she found Arbuckle holding an ice cube against Virginia's thigh. He explained what had happened, and initially, Delmont agreed that Virginia simply appeared drunk. But then, something changed dramatically. Virginia began screaming and tearing at her clothes, behavior so alarming that it attracted the attention of other party guests. Zay Previn and Alice Blake rushed in to see what was causing the commotion. The situation was escalating rapidly, and Arbuckle, still believing that Virginia was either drunk or putting on some kind of performance, grew frustrated. He asked the guests to remove her from his room, a request that in hindsight would seem callous to prosecutors and the public alike. When director Fred Fishback entered to witness the unfolding drama, he heard Virginia cry out to Arbuckle, "Stay away from me! I don't want you near me!" But it was her next words that would seal Arbuckle's fate. Virginia turned to Delmont and asked, "What did he do to me, Maudie?" "Roscoe did this to me." Those words, "Roscoe did this to me," would echo through courtrooms and newspaper headlines for years to come. In their efforts to calm Virginia, they placed her in a bathtub filled with cool water, which seemed to soothe her temporarily. With Virginia in a more subdued state, Arbuckle and Fishbach helped her to room 1227. It was at this point that Arbuckle made what seemed like all the right moves. He summoned both the hotel manager and a doctor. But here's where the story becomes even more tragic. When the attending doctor examined Virginia, he concluded that she was merely intoxicated, just drunk. Nothing more serious than that. So Virginia was left to rest in bed while the party, incredibly, continued around her. Arbuckle, presumably relieved that the doctor had found nothing seriously wrong, went ahead with his original plan to take May Taub into town. When he returned to the hotel later, he was informed that the hotel doctor had administered morphine to Virginia, and she was now sleeping peacefully, ensconced in a drug-induced rest. Everyone thought the crisis had passed. The doctor had said she was just drunk. She was sleeping peacefully. The party had been saved. But Virginia Rappe would never wake up from that morphine-induced sleep. She would die, and with her death, she would take down one of the biggest stars in Hollywood. What happened next was perhaps the first true media trial in American history, a harbinger of the celebrity scandals that would dominate our culture for the next century. The press, particularly the sensation-hungry New York newspapers, smelled blood in the water, and they circled like sharks. The coverage was relentless and merciless. The same media that had once celebrated Arbuckle's gentle comedy now painted him as a monster. They used his 260-pound frame against him, suggesting that he had used his size to overpower the much smaller Virginia Rappe. The lovable, good-natured, chubby man that audiences had adored was suddenly reimagined as a nefarious predator. Newspapers capitalized on every sordid detail they could find or fabricate. The scandalous hotel room antics, the excessive illegal drinking during Prohibition, The disgraceful behavior they claimed was displayed by all parties involved. The story had everything the jazz-age public craved: sex, death, celebrity, and scandal. The film studios, terrified of the negative publicity, immediately distanced themselves from their former golden boy. This wasn't just about one scandal. This was about Hollywood's entire reputation. The industry was already being perceived as a moral wasteland rife with illegal activities and debauchery, and the Arbuckle case was becoming the perfect symbol of everything that was supposedly wrong with Tinseltown. The meticulously crafted public images of celebrities were suddenly under threat from this new breed of sensationalist journalism. The Arbuckle scandal wasn't happening in isolation. Other Hollywood figures were also finding themselves in the crosshairs of scandal. The grand jury hearing that would determine Arbuckle's fate kicked off at 7:30 p.m. on a Monday evening, and from the very beginning, it was clear this was going to be unlike any legal proceeding anyone had ever seen. Reporters and spectators filled the hallway, pushing as close to the secured doors as security would allow. Throughout the night and into the following day, witnesses escorted by police officers entered and exited the courtroom amid pandemonium and a flurry of camera flashes. The first witness was the woman who would become the prosecution's star and most problematic witness, Maud Delmont. She was interrogated for more than an hour and later recalled for an additional 15 minutes. When she finally emerged from behind those closed doors, she was heavily reliant on a policewoman for support, reportedly unwell from the shock of her friend's death. But something strange was happening. Other witnesses followed: Al Sumnaker, Zay Prevost, and several doctors who had been involved in the case, including Dr. Shelby Strange, the coroner's office surgeon who had conducted Virginia's second autopsy. Each testimony seemed to raise more questions than it answered. 2 floors up, in cell 12, Arbuckle was sitting anxiously on the edge of his bed when guards approached just before 1 a.m. He was needed in the grand jury room. As he quickly got dressed, a journalist described him as nervously walking to the courtroom, sweating, his usually comic face looking more tragic than any tragedian could manage. Inside the courtroom, the jury foreman asked Arbuckle to share his version of events. But Arbuckle's response was brief and legally sound. His lawyers had advised him not to speak at that moment. He spent only 3 minutes in that courtroom before being escorted back to his cell. 3 minutes that felt like a lifetime. What came next would scandalize the nation and provide newspaper editors with headlines that sold papers by the millions. Al Sumnaker took the stand, and his reluctance to divulge details of the party led the prosecution to label him an adverse witness. After 3 grueling hours, the session concluded, but Sumnaker's most shocking revelation was yet to come. The following day, in a courtroom filled primarily with anxious mothers who had come to witness this moral drama unfold, Assistant D.A. Golden began questioning Sumnaker about what he had heard the morning after the party. "Did Arbuckle mention anything about a piece of ice?" Golden asked. "He did," Sumnaker responded. "What did he say?" "He said that he had put a piece of ice on Miss Rappe." "On?" Golden inquired, sensing something more. "No," Sumnaker corrected himself. What Sumnaker said next caused a collective gasp in the courtroom. Though his exact words weren't printed in the newspapers of the day, they were considered too scandalous. He testified that Arbuckle had claimed to have inserted ice into Virginia Rappe's vagina. The courtroom erupted. Golden, recognizing the explosive nature of this testimony, had Sumnaker whisper the exact words to the court reporter. These words were then written on a note and passed to both the prosecution and defense. The implications were clear and devastating. Golden used this testimony to paint a picture of Arbuckle as someone capable of the most depraved acts, suggesting that a man who could casually joke about such vulgarity regarding a dying woman could be capable of anything, including rape and murder. The defense team, led by attorney Dominguez, knew they had to address not just the facts of the case, but the character assassination that was taking place in the press and the courtroom. When Sumnaker was recalled to the stand, Dominguez managed to establish several crucial points. First, he revealed that Semnaker wasn't actually Virginia Rappe's manager, as had been suggested, and had only known her for 6 weeks. More importantly, he got Semnaker to admit that Arbuckle might have said he placed the ice on Rappe, not in her. A crucial distinction that could completely change the interpretation of events. But Dominguez wasn't finished. He introduced a new element to the case. Earl Lynn, a minor movie actor whom Delmont had allegedly tried to blackmail. When Judge Lazarus ruled that the defense shouldn't deviate from the murder case at hand, Dominguez explained the relevance of this information. He suggested that Semnaker, Delmont, and others had planned to use Rappe's torn clothing to extort money from Arbuckle. This introduced the possibility that the entire case was built on a blackmail scheme gone wrong, that Virginia Rappe's death had disrupted a plan to shake down Hollywood's biggest star, and now the conspirators were trying to salvage their scheme through the legal system. The question of why Rappe's torn clothes were found in Semnaker's possession remained a mystery. His explanation was weak at best. He claimed he initially took them as a joke, but later intended to use them to clean his car. The defense suggested that Semnaker and Delmont may have planned to use the clothes as evidence in their blackmail plot, a scheme that presumably fell apart with Rappe's death and the subsequent criminal investigation. While the courtroom drama played out, a crucial question remained: what really caused Virginia Rappe's bladder rupture? The medical evidence would prove to be as contentious as the eyewitness testimony, with the defense proposing several theories to explain how Virginia might have sustained her fatal injuries. The defense suggested that she might have accidentally hit the side of the bathroom door as she entered, or possibly fallen within the bathroom, landing on the side of either the bathtub or toilet seat. Another possibility was that the rupture occurred after Arbuckle initially tried to help her, perhaps when he moved her from the bathroom floor to the toilet seat, or when he helped her to the bed. The most plausible theory, according to the defense, involved Virginia's known medical condition, cystitis, a chronic bladder inflammation. They speculated that she might have been suffering from bladder spasms related to her condition, causing her to fall off the bed in pain. This fall might have caused her to land on her abdomen with enough force to rupture an already overextended bladder. However, these theories faced significant challenges. The idea of Rappe hitting her abdomen with enough force against a bathroom door seemed implausible unless she was heavily intoxicated, which the testimony didn't support. The absence of bruises or marks that would indicate such a dramatic fall also cast doubt on these explanations. The prosecution focused on Arbuckle's actions and reactions to challenge these alternative theories. They questioned why, upon discovering Rappe in distress, Arbuckle didn't immediately seek professional medical help. They also pressed him on why he failed to provide details about Rappe's condition to others at the party, the hotel's assistant manager Harry Boyle, or the first doctor who examined her. After all the testimony, all the media circus, all the speculation and scandal, the moment of truth arrived. The grand jury had to decide whether the evidence warranted putting Roscoe Arbuckle on trial for murder. The decision was both a relief and a continued nightmare for Arbuckle. The jury determined that while the evidence suggested something had gone terribly wrong that Labor Day weekend, it didn't justify a murder charge. Instead, Arbuckle would face trial for manslaughter, a verdict that actually incited applause from the predominantly female audience in the courtroom. The scene that followed was emotionally charged. Arbuckle shared tearful moments with his wife, Minta Durfee, and his mother-in-law amid the courtroom chaos. When court was adjourned, several women rushed to congratulate the man they still saw as the lovable, fatty Arbuckle they had grown up watching on screen. But this was a bittersweet victory at best. Arbuckle's demeanor remained serious, his eyes moist with emotion. As his family was escorted into the judge's chamber, his wife began to falter, but Arbuckle supported her with evident tenderness, a moment that reminded observers of the gentle man behind the scandal. The defense's $5,000 cashier's check for bail on the manslaughter charge was accepted, and Arbuckle was free, albeit possibly temporarily. As he returned to his cell to gather his belongings and bid farewell to his fellow inmates, newspaper photographers swarmed around him, asking him to perform for their cameras one last time. They wanted him to roll a cigarette one-handed, a trick from his comedy routines. Arbuckle declined, stating that only the other Arbuckle could do that. A poignant recognition that the performer he had once been was gone forever. Even after Arbuckle was eventually acquitted in his third trial, with the jury even issuing an apology for the ordeal he had endured, the damage was irreversible. The relentless media scrutiny had destroyed not just his career, but his entire life. His reputation, built over years of bringing joy to millions, was shattered beyond repair. The film industry's response was swift and merciless. Studios that had once fought to sign him now treated him like a pariah. His films were pulled from theaters, his contracts canceled, his name erased from projects. The man who had been Hollywood's first million-dollar star found himself unemployable in the industry he had helped build. The personal toll was devastating. Arbuckle fell into alcoholism, his marriage crumbled under the pressure, and his health deteriorated rapidly. He died at the age of just 46, his life cut short by the stress and heartbreak of his ordeal. The gentle comedian who had once brought laughter to the world died broken and largely forgotten. But the Arbuckle scandal did more than destroy one man's life. It fundamentally changed Hollywood. The industry, desperate to rehabilitate its image, created the Motion Picture Production Code, a system of moral censorship that would govern filmmaking for decades. The scandal also ushered in the era of celebrity public relations, as studios realized they needed to more carefully manage their stars' images. The case became a cautionary tale about the power of the media to destroy lives, the dangers of trial by public opinion, and the tragic consequences when scandal, sensationalism, and prejudice combine. It was a preview of the celebrity culture that would dominate the next century, a culture where fame could be both a blessing and a curse, where the public's appetite for scandal could consume even the most beloved figures. That's our deep dive into the tragic and controversial story of Roscoe, Fatty Arbuckle, and Virginia Rappe, a scandal that exposed the dark side of fame, the ruthless power of the media, and the devastating fallout of a single Labor Day weekend in 1921. It's a story about how quickly the public's love can turn to suspicion, how sensationalism can cloud the truth, and how the price of celebrity can sometimes be more than just reputation. It can be a life. If you want to go deeper into Virginia Rappe's case, head over to the Skoob app, because this isn't just history. It's a window into the fragile nature of fame and the cost of living in the spotlight. Download Skoob on the App Store or Google Play to unlock the full experience. I'm Kieran Caldwell, and this has been Spotlight Murders. Until next time, stay curious, stay aware, and remember, in Hollywood, the line between comedy and tragedy has always been thinner than we'd like to believe.